All right. So I'll do a quick intro of Perpetual, but then I'm going to talk a little bit about the broader landscape, and then I'll come back to talk more about our specific process and journey and things that we've learned. So Perpetual, as you know, and Ramel already actually did a good intro to Perpetual's work, but we are a nonprofit founded in 2021, but not really kind of fully up and running until the end of 2022. And our mission is to accelerate the adoption of reusable systems, starting with foodware. And what we recognized, given a bunch of the work we had done in this space prior to starting the organization, is that, well, there's a lot of wonderful efforts underway, many startups, many businesses doing pilots, that there was a bit of a chicken and egg challenge of how can we really understand what's possible for reuse, especially kind of in a reuse foodware context, if we can't do it at a sufficient scale for it to be successful. And so we recognized that there was a bit of a failure arc with startups and pilots where they would get started, there'd be a lot of excitement, and then they wouldn't, it's really hard to grow incrementally because so much of what makes reuse work is the immersive infrastructure, the convenience, the things that just are what allow it to become a normalized habit. And without all of those supporting pieces, it was just really, really challenging for small efforts to get there. So our insight and hypothesis is that city scale work is essential to proving the case for reuse and having the ability to demonstrate models where reuse is actually working. We are partnering with 4 cities, as Ramel had also mentioned. These are they. And I'll share a little slide later on sort of where we're at with each of the cities. It's definitely been a bit of a horse race in terms of who's going to launch first and, the different processes. Part of the value of working with 4 cities is that as things change, as they do over time in the municipal context, we've been able to kind of shift effort and resources across cities to make sure that we're always pushing to get something implemented. We do not yet have a city launched. At the moment, it is still a horse race between Hilo and Galveston in terms of which one will launch first. As of today, my money's on Hilo being launched before the end of this calendar year. So I'll tell you more about all of that. But this is just sort of an intro to who Perpetual is and where we came from. We're a small team of people who have a deep background in reuse. We're currently 5 full-time employees and then a handful of contractors and interns that help everything that needs to get done. And I have so much I want to say to you, so I'm going to go somewhat quickly, and then hopefully that just gives you a sense of all the things we could talk about, and we can go a bit deeper in the questions because I know there's limited time. Okay, so one resource that was mentioned in my bio, but that I want to make sure you all are aware of, because I think it can be really useful as you're trying to learn more about what's possible and who's doing what, is the reuse landscape. This I just pulled from the website. We have, I think it's like 367 solutions actually operating in the US in some form. You can see these are the different types of solutions that are tracked in the database, includes everything from where to find a water fountain app, or getting reward points for using your reusable bag if you bring it back to the store each time, to more operational systems, refill vending dispensing, pre-filled systems. Package-free shops, as you can see, is one of the largest categories. There's a lot of package-free shops in the US, which is wonderful. And this is really sort of shops that are pretty dedicated to package-free, as opposed to just a grocery store with a bulk section where maybe they would let you bring your own package, but mostly they're providing single-use bags for that purpose. And then reuse advocacy, I'll mention, this includes education and outreach type campaigns, but it also includes technical assistance to businesses to help them change their practices. So just like, for example, for dine-in restaurants to switch from disposables to reusables. All of this and more is available in the database, but just wanted to make sure you had this landscape available to you. And then I wanted to quickly highlight 3 examples of what's happening in Europe. I did not see all of Lila's presentation, but I don't think she spoke much about Citeo, which is a really exciting process underway in France as part of their national extended producer responsibility law. They are putting something like 30 million units of reusable packaging onto the market starting this summer, and they're starting with glass. So I think this is something, if you haven't looked at Citeo's website for information about what they're doing and how they're doing it, it's all in French, but we have browsers that translate things, so you can definitely get a good handle on what they're up to. And this has been funded through about $100 million of funding from the EPR law. So it's been a huge process, very collaborative, really wonderful and amazing. And it'll be great to see how things progress. Aarhus may be a program that some of you are familiar with. This is the city in Denmark called Aarhus, and this is a collaboration between the municipality and Tamra, which is a reusable vending, or sorry, reverse vending machine manufacturer that has customized their machines to accept reusable cups back. So check out their stuff online. They've got some great videos and things. They've had, I think they're using plastic cups, but they've had a lot of success with business participation and user participation. And I think it's considered very successful. Other than that, the economics don't really work. So the municipality is covering the cost for now. It's a 3-year pilot. So I'm sure there'll be lots to learn as they start to get into their second and third years, and we can see what happens there. And then the third example I wanted to highlight for you is in Monaco. There's a program called Ma Consigne, which is largely for their lunches, because they have so many folks that come into Monaco as commuters and eat lunch in Monaco. And so they determined that was a huge source of waste for Monaco. And so it's all glass containers with plastic lids. And they've got these gorgeous reverse vending machines that they've created that people can return the cups. And this is also highly funded and subsidized by the principality. But it's a wonderful example of what a sort of citywide reusable foodware program can look like. And they have a lot of great success to learn from, also still a lot of challenges. That's definitely going to be a theme in my presentation, is that a lot to be excited about and a lot to learn and a lot to still solve. So last call out for just additional resources in the landscape. There's a ton of data there, so I won't spend any more time on that, but please do check it out if you want to learn more about what's happening in the US or world. All right, Perpetual's focus is on citywide open loop reusable foodware systems. So we know a lot of the work that's happening in the US right now is venue or stadium based. And that's where some of our largest reuse service providers operating today are focusing their attention, which is awesome. It's been great to see Seattle, Oregon, like there's so much that's happening there and better results, and it's getting more and more sophisticated. So really pleased to see the work that they're doing. Our focus, I would say, is quite complementary to that. I know the folks in Seattle, the way they tell the story is you have to start with stadiums, and then you use the stadiums to build the infrastructure, and then you can expand to open loop. Yes, that is definitely one way you can do it. Perpetual is not necessarily assuming you need to start with stadiums to have a successful open loop citywide reuse system, but we absolutely acknowledge that anchor systems, like whether it's schools or stadiums or corporate cafeterias, are absolutely helpful in getting enough volume into a system for the economics to work well. So we definitely align with kind of the spirit of what they're saying, and the work that we've done has not considered stadiums a prerequisite to doing open loop reuse. The way that we are working in this system is thinking about it as a citywide system where it is businesses. So I'm trying to think of the shortest way to say this. Everything is provided to businesses and consumers as a service. So there is a service provider, whether that's the municipality or a service provider or multiple service providers in a governing agreement. Businesses are opting in to use reusables as a service. They're paying a small fee for the use of those reusables. And then consumers are checking out the reusables and returning them also kind of in a service context. And then you have a business or a municipality that's doing all of the back end work around that to provide collection opportunities for businesses and consumers to provide the systems back into the program, get them transported to a washing hub. There can also be opportunities for businesses to wash it themselves, just a slightly different logistical arrangement, but primarily this works best. In our experience, businesses don't want to do their own washing. They're happy to have someone else deal with that and just bring them clean items, because it's most like what they're used to today with disposables. So the system or the service model tends to really work well, where things are getting picked up from the bins by the service provider, transported to the washing facility, redistributed once they've been cleaned and inspected, and then the cycle goes around and around. So this is the general model that we're working with here. There are absolutely other models. Some of them could work well. We think this is the one that works best for what we're trying to do. So happy to discuss other ideas if people want to debate the merits of other values, other approaches as well. As I sort of said, our thinking here is that we can use a successful citywide reuse system as a demonstration project. So we're trying to show what's possible. And we hope that that can be catalytic to the expansion of reuse more broadly. So really trying to provide blueprints, everything that we're doing is being documented so that we can provide everything as resources to other places that want to do this. So all the tools that we're creating and everything, they're not all necessarily ready to share today, but they will be at some point once we've actually done what we've said we're going to do and can build in all the learnings and make sure that what we're providing is the best insight possible. And just one last point on sort of how we think about why we're doing this. Reusable foodware is the easiest place to start, but absolutely the goal is packaging broadly. It won't be the first step. I know there are a bunch of packaging pilots out there, and there are coalitions of corporates trying to figure out reusable packaging, which is awesome. I'm glad they're doing that. The work that we are doing and able to do is starting here with reusable foodware to demonstrate to build the infrastructure and demonstrate that reuse works. And then I think adding in more and more items over time becomes more and more possible. So this is the vision is, yes, foodware and so much more over time. All right, so a bit about how we've worked. Ramel mentioned that Trash Free Waters has been super generous in providing us with funding for some of the data work that we've wanted to do. So the University of Georgia did their circularity assessment protocol, which includes a lot of different elements of waste and litter landscaping, as well as just kind of a deep dive into how the current system of disposability works. So we've been super fortunate to partner with them on that. Another academic partnership that we have is with the Data Science Institute at the University of Chicago, and they've helped us with bin placement and routing optimization in each of our 4 cities, which has been invaluable. It also is an input to the life cycle assessment, because we can say an average cup will travel 6 miles, or whatever. And so knowing the distances, the hours traveled is also really helpful to financial modeling, understanding the number of labor hours required, and other things like that. So there's lots of good connections between all of these different models and data collection efforts and how we understand what's going to be possible. The first thing that we did in all of our cities is community design workshops to go through the design process. And this is such an essential step, I think, in a community-led system, is to go through the process of talking to the community about what they want and how the system would work best for them. We did everything in Galveston, which is all these elements are from our Galveston experience in both English and Spanish. We've actually got all of these materials, though. We did 4 different languages in Ann Arbor, 4 languages in Hawaii, and I think 3 languages in Savannah. So we have this and some of those are the same, but some are different. Hawaiian only done in Hawaii, of course. But the language piece is obviously super important to make sure you're able to get feedback from the full community. And then we've also been doing behavioral research to understand what will motivate people to use a reuse system and how to design the system to best align with existing behaviors so that we're not needing to think about behavior change. We can help normalize a new behavior that actually works really well for people. And so it's not a trade-off, but it's an added value. Here's a sense of kind of our whole process from start to finish. Again, I'm going super fast because there's so much I want to say, but you'll get the slides and you can ask me follow-up questions if you've got details that you want to check in on for each of these things. Yeah, so a lot of foundation building, big design process. Savannah is still in the design process. That's where they're at today. They've been our caboose from the beginning, but I would like to say they've built an extraordinarily strong foundation, which is great. And Arbor and Galveston are both in the sort of mobilizing infrastructure funding process. Galveston has some funding pending that we're just waiting to get finalized. So assuming that comes through, we'll be off to the races with implementation there. Hilo has funding for implementation. So we are currently the request for proposal for the service providers is live and it closes next Wednesday. So the next big step there is choosing the service provider, and then we'll start building the wash facility and going from there. And Perpetual's role is to support in a super hands-on way all the way through the end of the process, through implementation and beyond, to make sure that things are super successful and we are able to share a lot of the learnings and make everything about this really transparent and available to anyone who wants to do similar work. Our collaboration model, I think, is really worth highlighting because it takes so many people to do this work. We have the role that we play. We tend to be kind of overall project managers, technical and system design expertise, and we've done a lot of work on fundraising. We have wonderful program partners like Trash Free Waters. We work closely with PR3, who's working on reuse standards. Corporate partnerships have honestly been slightly underwhelming, but we have had a lot of good corporate partnership in the design process so that we have the greatest chance possible that corporate restaurant franchises and other corporate entities will be able to plug into the system, even if they're not willing to commit yet that they will do so at any particular time. And I've already mentioned a bunch of our academic partners within each city. And this is, I think, the super, super critical piece is having the right folks that connect to the community. So we tend to have actually multiple local partners. We tend to have a lead local partner, but we have a whole coalition of local nonprofits in every city that we're working in, because this is something that touches so many communities in so many different ways. And we need to make sure that we're communicating with them throughout the design and implementation process. City and county governments across our cities, they play super different roles. And that's something that I can talk to in more detail if that's interesting. But in Galveston, they're very much kind of involved, but don't really want any part of the implementation or ownership or ongoing management of the system. And so we're setting up a separate governance model in Galveston. In contrast, in Hawaii County, the county is the governance entity for the program. They're contracting out the service of the reuse program, but they're owning all the infrastructure. So a lot of different details and things we can get into there if that is of interest. And then finally, once you have a reuse service provider, they're obviously a key. They and one or more can be a really important part of the process. I'm not going to say too much about this. In our design process, we really wanted all the things to work and be perfect. There are absolutely some tensions between these, especially figuring out how to make things socially viable and economically viable. We've kind of squared these out as best we can in the current designs, and we know there's going to continue to be a learning process here as well. All right. I wanted to make sure I had time to get into a few of the details. I know Maddie had said you guys are particularly interested in some of the financial modeling. So here's a snapshot of how we've been thinking about financial modeling. So we actually have a financial model that we built and have been using across our 4 cities. It has a total of 67 different values, whether variables or inputs that we're using, and it's a 5-year kind of financial pro forma. So it assumes lots of different things. It assumes adoption and return rates are changing over time, and the cost efficiency are unlocked over time. It's pretty comprehensive. Just for a taste, I've got a selection of kind of variables here, as well as the actual inputs. These are pulled from our Hilo model, which is just what I had handy. So, and these are all not yet set in stone. So all of this could still change. But, we've looked at a lot of data collection in the community, understanding what is the current demand for disposables, how might that be displaced with reusables, both for businesses and schools, and then thinking about infrastructure, additional costs, things like that. And then over here is a lot more of the guesswork. And obviously we spent a lot of time learning from existing programs to understand what different ranges of viability are. And depending on where you are in a lot of these ranges makes a huge difference in how successful the economics of the system will be. I want to be really clear that it is extraordinarily challenging to offer reuse as a service to restaurants and schools that is both price competitive with disposables and profitable for the reuse service provider. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the idea of externalization of cost. Disposables externalize extraordinary costs. And so competing apples to apples with them is just really, really hard. Styrofoam costs a fraction of a cent in some cases. There's no way you're providing a reuse service for a fraction of a cent. There's definitely a viability zone here that we think we can find, but the economics are hard. I'm not sugarcoating that at all. The economics are super hard. Some of the things to keep in mind in terms of determinants of profitability are what price you can actually charge to businesses, and that depends on a lot of different things. How much adoption you can get. Volume is absolutely critical to getting enough revenue in the system to make it work. The return rate is really important, but perhaps not in the way you expect. In our systems, when you don't return an item, you actually get charged for not returning it. So you don't lose money when you have a low return rate. You actually make money when you have a low return rate, which is completely counter to what we're trying to accomplish. And so finding the return rate, you want the return rate to be as high as possible, full stop. And you want to know that you're not too reliant on the subsidy from a certain return rate, that if the return rate goes higher, that you start to lose money on that. So there's just a delicate balance there that needs to be managed And then all the other things that you would expect from any business: labor cost, utilization, labor efficiency, and the cost of the technology platform are all big determinants of how successful the economics can be for the reuse service provider. Maddie, I hope, I know I'm going to just take like 2 more minutes. I hope I'm not in too much trouble, but I think I have 3 more slides. I'm going to go really fast. Another topic that I know is important to you is accessibility. So I just wanted to highlight the ways that we've considered this in the design and how we've managed this. I'm sure it's not perfect, but this is what we've done so far. I already mentioned language. So we've done that in all the languages that are appropriate for each community. In terms of engagement, we've made sure that we go to the community instead of just having meetings that we hope that they will come to. And we've also provided cash compensation to people for their time and input in the process. We make sure to do a lot of consultation with communities on placement of infrastructure, both the return bin placement and the location of the wash facility. We've thought a lot about how to ensure that, for example, having a deposit doesn't become a financial barrier to participation. So the model that we're using is the library book model, where it's free to check out, though you do pay if you don't return it. So it's kind of like a library. And we also wanted to make sure that there was accessibility to people who don't typically use a credit card or a smartphone. And so the option to provide prepaid tokens, where it's like could be a key fob on your keychain, or it looks like a credit card and it's RFID enabled, just like everything else, or NFC, depending on which technology. And then you just tap it the same way you would tap a credit card or a phone to check out your items. And that can be either purchased for people who wish to have them, or you can actually make them free as part of like nutrition benefits program. So people can access it without actually any cost to them. In our systems, we're considering a redemption value. So if people do lose an item, we want to make sure we get it back. And so for folks that are in the community that are motivated to collect things for a small value of money, they can do that with abandoned items. We just need to make sure that they're not then motivated to take items that they should not be taking from places that like items have already been returned or have not yet been checked out. So that's taken into account. And then finally, the governance model that we've established for each of our systems explicitly includes mechanisms for responsiveness to community feedback over time. So that's some thinking on accessibility. Permitting was another thing that I wanted to touch on quickly. So permitting can be hyperlocal. So I cannot provide answers to what might be true in Miami. What I can tell you is that in the places we have worked, the primary permits we've had to focus on have been for public placement of collection bins. So either it's a sidewalk furniture permit or a right-of-way permit. The Department of Health wants to make sure that your standard operating procedures allow businesses to use the items. There have been some really great FDA food code updates recently that explicitly permit and provide guidance on a lot of different reuse use cases. So this should be a great tool. If your local health department hasn't already adopted it, it's something that they should be considering. And then the washing facility, typically you kind of need all your usual permits and approvals. If it's just a washing facility, it doesn't typically require a lot beyond that, though it's if you're permitted as a commercial kitchen or like a food packaging facility, then there can be additional requirements. So just note that. And then the PR3 standards on washing are a good reference here as well. Because we're not preparing food or really handling a lot of food, there haven't typically been FOG permits required anywhere that we've worked. I can't speak to Miami, of course, but this, unless you're trying to permit a commercial kitchen, this should not be an issue unless it is. So that's that. And then finally, 4 key pieces of advice. Because the economics is really challenging and restaurants are really sensitive to cost, consider thinking about how you might use policy that can either or drive high levels of adoption, either a requirement to offer a reusable option, for example, or something similar, or create economic parity between disposables and reusables by recognizing the costs imposed by disposables on municipalities and their taxpayers. So there's a lot of costs that we are paying for disposables today. They feel free, they feel convenient, they're not. There's a lot of good data on this. Making the case for disposables, there needs to be a recognition of the cost that they're imposing in terms of litter and waste management, and reusables don't impose those costs. So how do we make that present in the purchase moment as opposed to just after the fact when we have no choice anymore, I think is key. I am not recommending any specific policies, but this is something to think about if you really want a robust reuse economy to develop quickly, because the economics are a huge barrier. Address governance model early in the process. I've kind of hinted at this, but really clearly understanding and identifying what role municipal government will play, who will own the various system assets and equipment, and who's responsible for top-level system management optimization is really important. It takes a really, really long time to get money to do this, so plan ahead. And I think there can be a temptation because reuse feels like a really simple business to say, we'll start it ourselves. You can, but don't do it alone. You really should recognize the value of experienced service providers. Successful reuse operations are incredibly efficient and optimized, and starting from scratch is really hard and expensive. So we absolutely understand the desire to have this be a locally owned solution and cultivate local entrepreneurship. And I think that's absolutely doable, but you need to be a little creative about how you make sure you're bringing the expertise needed into that from the very beginning so that you're not setting people up to fail. Okay. Reuse is amazing. It does all these great things: climate, human health, pollution and marine debris, waste, and local jobs. That is all.